Morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Tracy Jackson, Assistant Director at the National Literacy Trust for Early Years. I'm delighted to welcome you to our first Early Years webinar, The Gift of Early Reading. Thank you for joining us today. I know how incredibly busy everyone is, but we have wonderful speakers, so I hope you thoroughly enjoy this session and leave feeling inspired, but also proud of the work you do every day to give children this precious gift. I'm going to cover a little bit about the National Year of Reading and what's on offer, and then we'll hear from our speakers. Please do ask questions at any point using the chat. We'll gather those questions and we'll share as many as we can with the speakers at the end of that session. We'll finish today's webinar with a quick overview of what's next and how you can access and share further resources. For ease and focus, only the speakers' videos will be visible throughout the session. And please note that today's session is being recorded and the slides will be shared with you through email. Next slide, please, Gavin. There'll be a year-round programme of national moments, professional content and targeted support for early years educators, settings, schools, libraries and community groups, all designed to help children fall in love with stories, books and reading. There'll be a calendar of national early years literacy moments supported by ambassadors such as Joe Wicks, Andy Day and wonderful authors such as Camilla Reed and Julia Donaldson. We'll be sharing practical tools and campaign resources that can be used in settings and schools and shared with families. There's a core offer from the National Literacy Trust alongside a wide range of ideas, inspiration and brilliant resources from wonderful partners across the sector, many of which will be on the call today, so you can pick and choose what works best for you. There'll be a separate focus each term. In spring, we're focusing on supporting individual practices in the room. And in the summer term, we'll focus on the whole setting and the role of leadership in creating that culture of reading. And finally, in the autumn term, we'll focus on community, working with families to open the door to reading at home. We'll share each term's activity as early as possible with every term released in advance. So for example, the summer activities will be shared during spring term. Moving on to next slide, please, Gavin. So sharing a little bit more detail about what this looks like for early years as part of the National Year of Reading. As spring term progresses during the National Storytelling Week, we'll be bringing stories to life through music and poetry, working with author Simon Moll and musician and performer Gecko on a special storytelling experience. So there'll be videos, resources and lesson plans available for settings for you to share with families. We'll also be launching a new resource. Oh, just go back at Gavin, We'll also be launching a new resource, Share Stories With Me, filled with simple, reassuring ideas to help families enjoy sharing stories at home, building confidence, and most important, that connection and joy. Spring term will also include familiar national moments, including World Book Day, alongside our Early Words Matter conference, which we'll come back to later. In the summer term, the focus shifts to leadership, sharing research and spotlighting practice on building a reading-rich curriculum, using stories intentionally across learning in the early years. And in the autumn term, the focus moves beyond the setting and into families and communities, with parental engagement at the centre and support for making reading a meaningful part of everyday life. Next slide, please, Gavin. So why the National Year of Reading? Why now? This slide shows us why the National Year of Reading matters so deeply. In 2025, just 1 in 3 children and young people aged 8 to 18 told us that they enjoy reading in their free time. That's the lowest level we've seen in 20 years, and a 36% drop since we first started asking this question. We also know that fewer than 1 in 5 children now read every day. And we all know that enjoying reading, choosing to read yourself, is vitally important, particularly for children and young people. What's important to note is that this decline in reading enjoyment doesn't sit in isolation. Growing evidence from multiple sources points to the profound decline in reading engagement across generations, and we know that that begins in early childhood. Next slide, please, Karen. Our 2025 early years research, involving over 3,000 parents and carers of children aged 0 to 5 across the UK, shows a significant drop in everyday reading with young children since 2019. Fewer than half of the parents reported reading with their child on a daily basis, compared with around 2/3 in 2019. And we know this isn't about parents valuing reading less. We know families are under increasing pressure due to time and capacity. But at the same time, many children are starting nursery or school without the communication skills they need, and some haven't yet had enough chances to experience the joy and the connection and the rich language that comes through songs, rhyme, and shared stories. But we also know that you're changing that trajectory through the language-rich, story-filled environments that you're creating every day. Children are building communication, confidence, and belonging. And that's why early years practice and the early years are so vitally important in the National Year of Reading. Next slide, please. Thanks, Gavin. So what does this mean for us? It means keeping the joy at the heart of early reading, inviting children into language, imagination, and meaning, helping them see themselves as readers long before they can read independently. Weaving stories and reading naturally through play, routines and transitions, and becoming part of how children explore, connect, and make sense of the world. That reading with warmth, expression, and delight, so that stories become irresistible and children return to them again and again, not because they've been asked to, but because they want to. And that's when reading starts to feel like something that belongs to them. The stories we choose matter too. When children see their lives, languages, and cultures and interests reflected in those books, reading becomes personal and inclusive, strengthening their identity as readers. And finally, the vital role we play in opening the door to reading at home through those simple, reassuring messages and shared resources with families, so that they can feel confident that reading and sharing stories can be fun and manageable as part of everyday life. To help us think and explore this thinking in more depth, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Karen Boardman. Karen has spent over 35 years working in early childhood education. Alongside her academic work, Karen has played a key role in shaping sector guidance, including Birth to 5 Matters. Karen's work consistently brings together that research and practice, helping us to understand what early reading looks like in those everyday moments and why those moments matter so much. She's currently working with Stronger Practice Hubs to develop practical support for early reading in action. I'm really pleased and delighted to welcome Karen to help us think about how we keep joy, stories, and reading at the heart of early years practice. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning, everyone. Unfortunately, my university has decided to cut the grass right underneath my window this morning. So sincere apologies if you hear some background noise. I've tried my best to dull the sound. Good morning, everyone. It's really lovely to be here. Just want to set the scene, as Tracy did so beautifully for us. When we're talking about literacy learning, we're referring to communication, speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And literacy for very young children is diverse, responsive, meaningful, so that we situate ourselves in the literacy possibilities in everyday play worlds of young children. So whilst we're carefully considering the opportunities within our care routines, playful pedagogies, and also balancing those tricky discussions about adult-led and child-led learning, it's really easy for us to lose the focus of the joy of literacy learning within play. And being part of the National Year of Reading helps to remind us that for very young children, literacy is not just about learning to read and write, or focused on those who struggle with reading and writing. Our early literacy experiences shape all of our interactions and impact on our moral, cultural, and social structure of families, communities, and everyday lives of young children. So today, I'm going to task us with thinking about literacy learning for under fives, particularly how we support early reading from birth onwards, which align with the ambitions of the National Year of Reading. And I am going to remind us all that Professor Teresa Kremin gave us some, tasked us some reading resolutions, nurturing reader identities, and having fun with reading and being strategic. So hopefully this will support. So I'd like to start with a provocation. I think it's important for us to take a moment to think about how we embed early reading within our practice and our provision. Think about what your understanding of early reading is. Just for a minute, if you just either write it on a piece of paper, pop it in the chat, it's entirely up to you. Just have a think about what you understand early reading to be and what kinds of things you're doing already, because I know this will be absolutely wonderful stuff. I'll stop talking, give you a moment. I can see some wonderful stuff in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so if you jot some ideas down for now, and we'll come back to this at the end of the webinar. I think it's important for you to think about your understanding of early reading. And if you've heard me speak before, you already know the answer to this, so thank you. Thank you, Gavin. And hopefully at the end of this, thank you. Hopefully at the end of this session, we will develop your confidence in recognising early reading. We'll value early reading interactions as those foundational reading experiences, and you'll be able to embed evidence-informed early literacy approaches. So I'm sharing with you an original perspective from a 5-year research project that is still ongoing. You know, when you open that can of worms and you can't close it again, that's what I feel like I've done for the practitioners that I'm working with, have worked with, and are still working with. It's a research project I'm really passionate about. Hopefully you can see that in all of the stuff that I do. Focused on what practitioners, teachers and leaders working with under fives do in their settings, based in England at the moment to support early reading and development. So there is a book, I'm not promoting the book, so apologies. Lots of papers. Most of my work is focused on under threes and under fives and early literacy. So the research question that I asked, which is really wide open, how do you support under fives with early reading? You're not supposed to know the answer to a research question when you ask it, and certainly didn't know what I was going to get, but really excited with the data. So in total, 147 survey responses were captured. We carried out 6 focus group workshops with 67 different participants. Some of them are filled in the survey, not all of them. 8 in-depth interviews and 9 reflective zines. So a reflective zine is an empty booklet where the research question was posed and practitioners, teachers, leaders could answer that in any way that they wanted to. I worked with graduate practitioners on this research project, and that isn't any disrespect to any practitioners at any stage of their career. I just wanted that reflectiveness to come through within the reflective zine. So 5 years of data. If any of you starting a research project, don't do what I did, which was do all of that in one go. I'm still analysing some of the reflective scenes that came in later. It's really, really exciting and interesting, but manage your time and your well-being a little bit better than I did. So in total, 341 practitioner teacher voices, which is really important to me. The next stage of the research project is obviously communities and families. So hopefully I'll be able to pull this together fairly soon. So the data story, lots of findings, really complex findings. But in a nutshell, 5 years worth of data comes down to a few key sentences: play, talk, rhyme, songs, music, sharing stories and telling stories. And that those everyday cultural interactions shape our reading experiences from birth. So that came through absolutely through every aspect of data. Alongside that, school readiness, top-down approaches, neoliberal outcomes-based approach, that teaching phonics too early, being very pencil-based before children are ready, detrimentally impacts on what practitioners, teachers do with very young children. Remember, the research was focused on under fives. So it's those children that are in our nurseries and in our reception classrooms. Too much too soon was a key theme. Systematic synthetic phonics influenced the provision for under threes. Therefore, children are being taught formal phonics from the ages of 2 years old in nursery settings, which was a finding that really upset me, and I did not know that was going to be happening. You can see why. So, practitioners, leaders, teachers constantly said, but that's what we've been asked to do by our parents, by our schools, by our trusts. You can absolutely understand it. But I'm really, really clear about this, and I'll talk a little bit more within this webinar, that teaching systematic synthetic phonics before you do the foundational stuff of early reading is going to waste everybody's time and switch children off reading completely. So let's not do that. And practitioners, teachers do not always understand what early reading actually is in practice, which is understandable. Lots of conflicting advice out there. So practitioners, teachers, leaders talked about the children are too young and not ready to read, which obviously reading happens from birth. I use the phrase early reading, as do Ofsted and other researchers. I don't like the early bit in the early reading because reading happens from birth, but I just think it helps us contextualise. Early reading is the bit before phonics, and we don't want to get involved in the phonics bit this morning. And also too busy to read. So that well-debated care versus education. I've not got time, I can't fit it in. When my understanding of early reading and supporting all literacy experiences means that it's embedded in our care routines as well as everything else we do. So that's kind of the nutshell. I'm going to share some snapshots of the research findings, because I think it's really important for you to see the depth and breadth of the data that came through. So this is from a private day nursery who shared some examples of visual tracking for early reading. One of the important things we introduced for early reading, because we hadn't given it much thought before, is lots of visual tracking activities, indoors and outdoors, to support the children. So we set up things like water play funnels, ramps, shadow matching activities, torch games, lots of ball play, throwing, catching, marble runs, target practice, balloons, bubbles. We know how important these physical things are for our children to read and write. Puddle jumping in a private nursery, again. Our toddlers love puddle jumping. We've just focused on the joy of talking, shape of puddles, colours, how many jumps we get, and the language alongside the splashes, squish, splat, tap, trickle, listen to sounds, discriminating sounds, hearing and experiencing. And we get so much talk out of puddle jumping. That particular nursery did we're going on a puddle hunt, not we're going on a bear hunt, which was lovely to see. And from a nursery school head teacher, which I've stolen her phrase, herding sheep, and there is a paper coming out soon that you'll be able to read focused on this data. I talk about, we've given this such a lot of thought being involved in the research project, when, how and why we support children with their early reading development. And when it comes to story time, we need to revisit this as a whole team. It's a little bit like we're using story time to herd the children in one place, a bit like sheep, especially for our 3 and 4-year-olds. It's like, oh wow, I haven't given this depth of thought that it needed. I've been so concerned with the formality of reading, writing and communication that the timing and the point of sharing stories is getting lost. So this head teacher in particular talked at length in an in-depth interview about the routine of the day and story time and the early reading focus was totally lost because it was based on adult driven routines, adult driven formality, and wonderful stuff. This head teacher changed things around. So it's just something to think about when you are herding sheep and those children are enjoying a story, and they will be enjoying a story. The value you're placing on story time can get a little bit lost if you're herding sheep and not focusing on the story time. So you might be thinking, oh, hang on a minute, but story time at the end of the day is the right thing to do. I would task you with putting story time lots of different points in the day. And those of us that have worked in busy nursery environments and reception class environments, that end of the day, packing bags, story time is not the right time for that end of the day, for lots and lots of reasons. And I know you know that already. Okay. So complex findings, 5-year research project and continuing. From my perspective, early reading is reading that's connective and meaningful for under 5s. It is not a discrete set of skills to be learned or taught. It's got nothing to do with systematic synthetic phonics. That happens afterwards. But early reading is everything that we do that offers meaning to children in their cultural lives. Talking, lots of talk, singing, rhyming, rapping, listening and making music, rhythm and steady beat. Those are all the important things that we need to be doing with our children in our nurseries from birth, so that when children do have to do the formal stuff, they've already had those that foundational skills that will support them. So early reading, from my perspective, having taken part in this research project, is broad and meaningful, and it's a relational process. If it has no meaning to the children, you're not going to get any buy-in. So, you know, Teresa's advice about making sure that you are working with the children's interests, making it fun and nurturing reader identities is so important, particularly working with under 3s and under 5s. And also, early reading is just too complex to separate from communication, talk, language, literacy and play. We shouldn't be doing that, yet we do. You can't possibly say reading is just that bit, communication is that bit, language is that bit, and literacy is that bit. Once we start putting things into separate components, we're not thinking about the children, and the children do not separate those components. It's all meaningful and relational for young children. So early reading is rooted within communication, speech and language. too complex to separate, which means that we have to really get on board with all the wonderful stuff that happens in our nurseries and classrooms. So Sally Noun talks about intrapersonal and interpersonal skills as well as myself. And the intrapersonal skills are the self-awareness, attitudes, and the confidence. And the interpersonal are the skills we use every day when we communicate and interact with other people. And we do that to assign and convey intended meaning. So as a person, you have a different audience at different times in your life. So do children. Children might have traditional stories at home. They might have traditional rhymes at home that are not the same rhymes, songs, and stories that you have in the school. But we do have to make sure that it all has meaning to our young children and their families. So Sally and I talk about similar things, which is the rhyme, rhythm, steady beat patterns, the sound games. All of those things are how children are bringing together the mutual intrapersonal and interpersonal skills. So they're making meaning within their play and within their literacy experiences. So in order to support children, we need to have a shared understanding of what this is. And this is your role in shaping children's experiences of reading within the National Year of Reading. Just reminding us, again, because I'm really, really passionate about this, play is the way that children learn. So everything that I'm talking about is embedded within play. And if you're not aware of Play Matters, I don't know how you're not, but if you're not, it's just a link to the Play Matters document that's been created by the sector, for the sector, and with the sector. And our students here at Edge Hill University created an infographic, which I'm really proud of. They wanted to share with our students here at the university and our partnership that these are the foundational skills. You know how an iceberg works, all the important stuff there. There are pressures, and we have, our students did pull together those pressures. We use this infographic quite a lot with all of our settings for CPD. It belongs to the university, but please feel free to use it and share it. The more that you can share all of the wonderful stuff about early reading, I'm happy with. You don't need to seek permission, just share it wide and far. So I want to get practical in the time that we've got left, because you've heard the research, you've heard the parts of the data. So let's get really, really practical about what this means in practice for you, so you can begin to embed it. So I'm just going to share some ideas, hopefully not to offend you. I'm sure all of these are already in practice and you're all doing this wonderful stuff already every day. But it can also be a reminder of, okay, I'm doing that, but I didn't really know why I was doing that. Oh, okay, I get it. This is early reading. So I always encourage our students, our practitioners, teachers, everybody I work with, to make a nursery rhyme prop box. Let's not forget how powerful our nursery rhymes are for young children. So a nursery rhyme prop box, you can see an example on the screen. It's got bus, so the wheels on the bus. I know you're familiar with that song. So those pre-verbal children or non-verbal children that want to sing the wheels on the bus can choose a bus, and that's reading. You have chosen an object and you've associated it. That is, by anyone's definition, reading. Same for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I would urge you to take care with some nursery rhymes and check on the Clippy website for nursery rhymes that are appropriate and relevant and not offensive. But remember that nursery rhymes have all been based on plague or famine or something that it wasn't very nice. And the point is rhymes. So if we don't like the nursery rhymes, then make sure we're using constant rhyming with our children. So for example, we line our children up in reception. We don't do it in nursery as much as we used to, but we line our children up in reception a lot for a lot of different reasons. Well, during that lining up time, then encourage children to carry out a rhyming string. So you can start at the beginning of the line, cat, sat, fat, mat, hat, pat. Encourage them to develop their rhyming skills and carry out a rhyming string. When a child gets stuck, just start a new one. Sometimes I used to start in the middle of the line, the end of the line. It just makes lining up fun. And also you are embedding that the value of rhyming to support children's reading and their language. And don't worry if there's lots of nonsense words in there. They don't have to be real rhyming words. Children are really creative. I used to do this a lot with our reception children, nursery children, and especially year 1 and year 2 children. You can then play word association games when they've got that rhyming string, alliteration. You can go to town on lining up activities. Nursery rhymes, again, can't stress how important nursery rhymes are for children from birth. Our practice with babies should be continuous singing, dance and rhymes, story cubes, story sacks, anything about telling a story. So we've got some wonderful picture books for reading stories, but let's not forget about telling stories. Encourage the children to be part of that telling stories. Tanker Tanker Skunk is one of my favourite books. Steve Webb is an absolute genius. If you haven't come across it before, it isn't an expensive book, but also it's online. You can read it online. It brings together all of the language patterns that children love so much and can have fun. And I tell our students here that I do Tanker Tanker Skunk a lot in nursery and reception. And I once had to cover for our year 6 class. And that particular year 6 class I had taught in reception. We had 10 minutes at the end of the day. And I did say to them, okay, can't go yet, but what shall we do? And, little hand went up. Can we do Tanker Tanker Skunk, Mrs. Boardman? Yes, of course we can. Sent a runner to reception and we had fun with Tanker Tanker Skunk. Felt a bit different with year 6 because they were tapping and clapping to steady rhythm and beat and making up their own rhythm and beat. But any music, steady beat, rhythm, rhyme that you do with children are foundational early reading skills. Rhyming, words and music. Let's not forget music. This is a photograph of one of my outdoor areas where we put music outside. You can see it's not musical instruments, they're everyday objects, and the children are tapping, clapping, stamping, doing that important music. Thank you, Gavin. So, thank you. Some more ideas to support your practice and embed those foundational reading skills are, make sure you don't forget about early reading outdoors. Early reading is everything that we do to support children with their language, talk, communication, rhyme, rhythm, steady beat. So I love map making. We do it outside a lot with children. Doesn't necessarily need to be fine detail. It's a wonderful activity. Make books outside. Activities like Caterpillar Cafe encourage children to be creative at the same time as supporting their imagination and creativity. I've talked about stamping and clapping. So in my practice and with our students here at the university, we do stamping and clapping activities. So it can be, I mean, it can literally be anything, but like a rhyming string, you can stamp, clap, tap, rhythm, steady beat. And for some more ideas, you could look at Musical Storyland. I don't work for Musical Storyland, but Musical Storyland is fabulous. There are 12 episodes on BBC iPlayer. They all embed stories, traditional stories, but they've got that rhythm, rhyme, steady beat, repetition, which is so important for young children. Use plungers outdoors, so writing doesn't happen by accident. Those big physical movements need to happen first, don't they? So plungers outside in the mud, little plungers for little hands and big plungers for bigger hands. Lots of natural outdoor activities. Use nature. Nature is early reading, all that association. I do a lot of weaving, wild weaving, leaf rods. Don't forget about bubbles in the winter. Okay, so bubbles tends to be associated with a summer activity, but I don't know if you've ever blown bubbles in the winter. They freeze, it's fabulous. Bubbles, very underrated, and so much language and talk happens with bubbles. And then put your easels outside. Remember, early reading is about bringing everything that children know together. And you'll see, oh, lights off. You'll see that all the ideas I'm suggesting don't have anything to do with formal books at this point. We should be using picture books in everything we do, but there are lots of other wonderful stuff that we can do to bring all this together. Okay. So I'm going to pause there and can I go back to the provocation, Gavin? Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to pause there and take you back to the question that I asked at the beginning, which was, okay, what do you understand early reading to be, and how do you embed it in your practice? So a couple of minutes now to think about, okay, let's put this provocation in action. Have some of the things that I'm talking about supported to develop your confidence in recognizing early reading within your practice and provision. So think about, okay, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. Or, yeah, I'm doing that already. And how you can enhance that. And how you can value everyday early reading interactions as foundational reading experiences. Remember that if children do all of this wonderful stuff that you're doing, you're going to have fun. That's the important bit. You're going to have fun with characters, that rhyming rhythm, steady beat, sharing stories, chatting, talking and play. And I'm going to be a bit controversial here. Stop asking children questions. They don't need to be assessed at every opportunity. Every time you ask a child a question, you stop their train of thought. If you think about it, I'm doing it to you now. Unfortunately, I'm asking you a question, I'm asking you to think about it, and it potentially stops your train of thought. So when we're supporting children's language and developing their early reading, we're chatting, we're not asking questions. I always operate the 5-finger rule. I don't know if you've come across this with welcome. So this is about, you can only ask a question when it gets to the thumb. So you've got comment, 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 and your question is the last thing that you would do. Because remember, we're encouraging language to support early reading. And then how you can embed some of the evidence-informed early literacy approaches across your pedagogy. So we know play supports children with learning. Repetition, lots and lots of repetition. So Changing your environments around often is not really supporting young children. Give them lots of opportunities to repeat skills over and over again. And those same stories, those familiar stories that they love. It's so important that we repeat that. I might be oversharing now, but I think it's a good example. I was telling the story of we're going on a bear hunt with my granddaughter in my home to settle her down to bed. My youngest son, who is her father, heard me start the story, sat on the bed with us, and he listened to the story because he still has really fond memories of we're going on a bear hunt story. So those memories mean everything to children. So share those stories as often as you can. But also, Tracy and I had this conversation fairly recently. Remember that not every family has time to do that as well. Our lives are really busy at the moment, aren't they? We're off to work. Sometimes if you've got 3 children to get ready for school, and then after school clubs and picking them up, the last thing that some parents want to do is have that bedtime story or that challenge of bedtime. So it's our job as early years educators to make sure that those things are happening as many times as they can during the day. Okay, so hopefully I've given you lots to think about. I'm nearly on time, so I feel like I'm doing okay with time. Just reminding you that you as practitioners, teachers, leaders are responsible for shaping everyone's early reading experiences. And it's such a powerful experience working with our under 3s and our under 5s in particular. Remember those rich, inclusive learning environments and experiences that you provide indoors and outdoors. And I'm going to pause there if that's okay, and see if we've got any burning issues before we move on.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. I think what we're going to do is move on to our next speaker and then draw together the questions that have come up in the chat. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I share your love of bubbles, and thank you for sharing your research, which is really insightful and rich data. And of course, for reminding us, we know how powerful the role we are in early years, and the powerful impact we're having on building those incredibly important foundations for reading. So thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. We'll bring you back to onto our panel so that if any of the questions have come up in the chat, we can go back to those in a little while. But now I'm delighted to introduce our next speakers, Professor Sally Pearse and Dr. Fufi Demisi. Sally is Professor of Early Childhood at Sheffield Hallam University and Director of Early Years Community Research Centre. And her work brings together research, practice, and community partnership to strengthen early language and communication, particularly in areas of social and economic challenge. Fufi is a senior lecturer at the Sheffield Institute of Education and Research and Knowledge Exchange lead at the centre. She developed the Twitch programme, an evidence-informed approach to shared storytelling that has reached nurseries across several regions and shown strong impact on practitioner confidence and children's language outcomes. Together, Sally and Fufi will share how Twitch uses shared storytelling, intentional talk, and purposeful interaction to support children's early language and early reading, reinforcing that key message of the National Year of Reading, that reading begins with talk, engagement, and meaningful shared experiences. We're delighted to have them with us today. So thank you, Sally and Fufi.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for inviting us. It's incredibly exciting to be here at the launch of the Year of Reading and to be able to share with you how we've developed the Twitch programme, and with some details about how it works and our plans for the future. Just a little bit of background. So, as Tracy described, Fufi and I have worked in early years for many years and work widely with practitioners in the region. And we understand the challenges that the sector faces currently from the feedback we get from practitioners and the fact that we spend part of our week every week within a nursery. And we were talking about lots of the things that Karen's been saying about what comes before reading and what's important in developing those skills, and the power of relationships, that relational pedagogy to support reading and developing reading for pleasure. As Tracy said at the beginning, we know that that's a really strong indicator for outcomes for children. So we've got sort of joint interests in that, and so we discussed how we could bring those together into a programme, and that's how Twitch was born. Twitch was actually just a placeholder. We were playing around with acronyms, but it stuck, and so it's here now with the rabbit symbol, and my colleague Fufi will talk a little bit more about that shortly. So Twitch is a programme for children aged 3 to 4 years, where a traditional story is the focus for activity and talk in the settings for a 3-week period. As Karen said, the importance of repetition comes in here and how children love to hear the same story over and over again. So the story is read to the children every day, and the practitioner uses shared or dialogic reading, so talking together with the children about the story to engage them. Alongside choice-based language games that are fun. Again, as Karen was saying, it's so important that we have that enjoyment. And then allowing children to take that story into their play through props in continuous provision, so that children can continue to develop their familiarity and engagement with the story, and they actually become experts in that story. The programme has 9 cycles per academic year with a different story for each of those 9 3-week cycles. Our intention in developing this was really, we designed it with the current early years context in the United Kingdom in mind. We know that there are issues around recruitment and retention, practitioner confidence if they go on training to be able to come back and embed CPD. We know there's concerns about language and reading for pleasure. So we have designed this programme using a coaching model so that settings are actually supported across the whole of an academic year to really gain the confidence and skills to sort of lever the power of book sharing. You know, I feel that we often, you know, don't unleash the power of stories. When Karen talked about the herding sheep, we used to refer to it as herding and carpeting, that at times we move children around because of adult priorities. It may be about getting ready for home time. It may be around tidying up and getting ready for lunch, and stories maybe should be picked for the nearest one as somebody's settling the children on the carpet. And we're losing out there so much on the power of those carefully selected stories and that repeated reading. So we developed Twitch with those things in mind. It was able to be piloted originally through the Shine Educational Trust, and unfortunately that original pilot was undermined to some extent by COVID taking over the world. But the settings that did manage to embed it fed back to us how they thought it improved children's language, practitioner confidence, and children's ability to use sort of more complex language skills. So as you can see from this slide here, we have a structure that takes us across a 3-week period, but the adult role throughout that is to really listen carefully. And I absolutely echo Karen's comments about the comments and the questioning. But if we have really good questioning skills and our interactions are built around those positive relationships, we can use questions. So it's tuning in, showing genuine interest and inviting children to talk about stories. So in that first week, the children are introduced to a traditional story and it's repeated every day. And adults do use some open-ended questions to prompt children's responses. In that second week, We introduce choice-based language games so that children can have some fun and play around with the story, and the adults use a specific form of interaction that Fufu will explain in more detail. And in the third week, there are story-related activities across continuous provision. And what we've found, as we saw from all those comments in the chat at the beginning, practitioners are amazingly resourceful and imaginative in the way that they take those ideas out into continuous provision. And adults really focus there on setting up that enabling environment for children. Repetition is crucial to this. We know from drawing on research evidence the power of repeated reading to support children's language and ability to engage. Repetition allows children to develop detailed knowledge of the characters, and the familiarity really facilitates their ability to engage in sort of abstract thinking about what could happen in the story and supports their focus and attention skills. And again, picking up on what Karen said about keeping things familiar, that also creates a safe environment for children to process and think. So this is a bit of an overview about how Twitch is delivered across the 3-week cycle. And I'll now pass over to my colleague Fufi to talk you through the programme in much more detail.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. Can I have the next slide, please, Evan? Okay, so what you can see here is if you like, the structure of the programme. Each week we've got for every 3-week cycle, we've got one story that we work with, or the practitioners work with. So that would be cycle 1. So here's an example. We've got Goldilocks and the 3 Bears was the story. And within the story, we also identify some interesting themes, like moral sort of themes, good, bad, good choices, bad choices. That's kind of written in the Twitch program, so practitioners don't have to go and do this. It's all there for them in the handbook that we have for the program. So week 1 is about getting the children to really know and understand the story in depth, the characters, through guided activities where practitioners encourage them to predict what's going to happen, to sequence different events in the story, and to explore a little bit more about the characters' thoughts and feelings. None of this is new. This is what practitioners do all the time, but we put in a structure that in week 1, through the daily reading of the story, now that's a key part, that the story has to be read every day. The practitioners do different activities every day related to the story. So what we're hoping is by the end of that week 1, children have a really good understanding of the story. They know the characters, they know what happens first, what happens in the middle, what happens in the end. So after that week 1, week 2 is where they engage in activities where they, we call them choice-based language activities. For example, we could ask the children, is Goldilocks, did she make a good choice? Yes, I agree. No, I don't agree. Would you rather be Goldilocks or would you rather be the grandma? The bears, sorry, I'm thinking of another story. So this is an opportunity, we see this week too as an opportunity for the children to start to develop their language and thinking and reasoning through guided questions from the practitioners. And week 3, as Sally said, is where they actually explore their story in the role play, continuous provision. And we've had feedback from our practitioners that they hear the children using the story a lot in their play in that week 3. So some of you might be sitting there thinking, 3 and 4-year-olds, how can they do that? And we got a lot of that response initially from our practitioners. But what's happened is that what we do actually is that we scaffold the whole process through a puppet, Rabbit. The puppet is the character where the practitioner helps the practitioner to model the responses that we're trying to encourage from the children. So Rabbit acts as a scaffold for the practitioner, because practitioners can practice the asking good questions through the Rabbit, and also Rabbit also responds in ways that models the responses to the children. So this process takes time. Children can't do this at the beginning, but by the end of the year, we found that they've surprised the teachers and practitioners at how much they've developed in their language and thinking and reasoning. So for each story, we've got the same format. So we've got 9 stories, so there are 9 cycles, and every story follows the same pattern. Okay, thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so what is distinctive about Twitch? Twitch does a lot of the things that people have done for a long time, but it structures it in a way that is accessible and manageable for practitioners. But one of the things that's very distinctive about it is that it's based on traditional stories. So a lot of people ask us why are all the stories traditional stories? They're like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Jack and the Beanstalk, etc. There are lots of reasons for that. One of them is that the familiarity that practitioners, and not all children, but kind of many children have with traditional stories. So we think that makes it accessible. They are usually short, and there are lots of, they're cheap, they're easily accessible. But more importantly, particularly for the week 2 activities, we chose to focus on traditional stories, because traditional stories often have very interesting dilemmas in them that open up an opportunity for conversation and meaningful dialogue. So, for example, did Goldilocks make a good choice by eating baby bear's porridge, or did she make a bad choice? Okay, now remember, these are also language that children hear all the time. Let's make good choices. We don't want to make bad choices. So we felt that a lot of these stories have the potential for dialogue and conversation. So making the children interested and engaged in the story, and also relating it to their own lives as well. So that's a key reason. But what we hope to use the traditional stories is that really it's almost like they're like training manuals, if you like. By the time school practitioners have used the 9 stories, we actually encourage them to choose their own stories, and we provide some resources for that, different stories that are good for a Twitch session. So many stories are out there where, that have interesting, juicy concepts in them that open up opportunities for dialogue. So the traditional stories there's a rationale behind why we're using it, but it's not the end of the process. They're just a starting point, a launch pad, if you like, for practitioners to use all these other wonderful stories that we have. So we think that's quite distinctive about it. The daily reading repetition, we think, is something also that is embedded in the program. We've got structured activities to promote dialogic reading. So what's dialogic reading? I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but this is about promoting reading experiences that are based on dialogue and conversation through careful use of questions, not over questioning, like Karen said, but through careful selected use of questionings. Now, dialogic reading used to be quite a big thing until the advent of phonics. There's lots of training programs for practitioners on dialogic reading, because it's something that's based on very robust evidence-based. Lots of research has shown that when children have opportunities to talk about stories and think about them with their peers and their teachers, they actually develop a love of reading, and also they develop the language skills that they need for literacy. I've mentioned Rabbit the puppet. Yeah, you can see Rabbit in the corner of our slides. Rabbit is a very, very important part of Twitch. So that's, we think, again, puppets, we've always used puppets, but they've kind of gone out a bit fashion. We're just bringing back something that was there before. I used to use puppets in my teaching all the time when I was in school. Another distinctive thing I'd say is that it's got a specific focus on developing children's language for reasoning. Now, we all know that language for reasoning is an important part of the characteristic of effective learning. So it's developing that sort of skill of giving reasons and thinking about the reasons, but it also supports their social emotional development, because actually when children can say why they've done something or why they don't like something, then actually it helps them to talk about their experiences more meaningfully. Finally, it's a whole class intervention. It's not just for a specific group, but we also have in the programme in week 3 a space for children who may need additional support or input to revisit the story and revisit some of the activities. I hope I'm not making it sound like a complicated program. It's not. It's quite structured, and it kind of follows the same pattern for every story. So you soon get the hang of it. So you can see that another key part of the program is what we train the practitioners in. We've on these 4 strategies: repeat, check, reason, and imagine. Now, they don't do that all the time, but at specific points, particularly in week 2, we encourage the practitioners to use this kind of language stem or language structure, I suppose, to kind of prompt and prod the children a little bit more to clarify their thinking and their reasoning. And you can see how on the left-hand side, how this kind of being trained in this kind of strategies has supported the practitioner to in kind of interacting with the children, giving them time to respond and to think a bit more deeply about what they're saying. So from the evaluation that was done by the EF last year, this was one of the biggest impacts of the Twitch program was on practitioners' confidence and having conversations that are based on repeating, checking, reasoning, and imagining. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I've mentioned also dialogic reading, we've mentioned it already, and repetition as the key part of the Twitch program. I'll start with repetition. It's really interesting how much this does for children's language development and kind of all sorts of benefits. So familiarity is a powerful thing for learning. So the more familiar they are with a story, the more they know the story, unsurprisingly. But what that allows them to do is that it gives them a fantastic base to do other things with the story, like develop their abstract thinking, like did Goldilocks make a good choice or a bad choice? If they didn't know the story really well and the characters really well, they wouldn't be able to do that as well as they can after they've got really familiar with the story. It helps them to focus, develop the focus and attention skills. It's like us as well. The more we do something, the more, we're noticing things that we haven't noticed before. It helps children to process any concerns and uncertainties within the safe context of a familiar story. So, if there's a bit of a story that they're not sure about, actually, when they hear it over and over again, it helps them to think through some of the things maybe they're not sure about. And finally, this is a surprise finding from the evaluation. It actually helps the practitioner as well. We found that a lot of practitioners, not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, some practitioners were very actually reluctant to actually read a story out loud. They were not sure, didn't have the confidence. But what they said to us afterwards is that because they had to read the story every day, they actually became more confident, and also that sort of released kind of more space in their heads for asking interesting questions and listening to the children and developing the children's ideas. So that was a surprising outcome. It wasn't just for the children, repetition, it was also for the educators. And the okay, that's fine. So so the impact of the Twitch program, we've run the Twitch program for the past probably for 4 years going, and what people say about it are pretty consistent about the impact on children. As you can see there, things like children's knowledge of the story, using their story in play and in conversation, the vocabulary expanding, and also the children themselves also asking questions, meaningful, thoughtful questions. So we keep sort of getting this kind of feedback from all the all the past 4 years. The study has kind of shown that these are familiar kind of observations of the practitioners, but also more significantly, the impact has been huge on the practitioners, their own reading skills, their confidence in asking better questions, and also their improved interactions with children. Next slide, please. Okay, so how can Twitch contribute to the National Year of Reading? We know that it's building about children's engagement in reading, the pleasure of reading, as a starting point for you know, developing all that knowledge and skills to be able to read for themselves in the future when they're a bit older. But we think that Twitch has a lot of things to offer. We know it promotes enthusiasm. Children hear the story every day for 3 weeks. Well, they don't hear it for 3 weeks, but in the first week they hear the story every day. And we've had feedback from some settings that the children have been so excited. They've gone home and told the parents. The parents have been asking what they've been doing, and so the setting starting sending the stories home. You know, that whole nice kind of triangle between homeschool and children, that's been happening. So we know that's happening at the home level as well as the setting. Children enjoy it, they look forward to it, and the Twitch gives the practitioners a sort of resource, a structured, almost like a reading curriculum. Some people have said to us, it feels like that. It's a curriculum that's based around reading, but it's also actually quite holistic as well. It connects to play, and it's we kind of know as well that it sparks interest beyond the book as well. Children, you know, practitioners bring in resources like, you know, hens and because of the story that they've read. Okay, so we think that, you know, it really fits in very well with the Year of Reading.
Okay, it's back to me just for the final slide, some takeaways. We haven't mentioned very much about it. It's just to give you a lot of details there about how the programme is experienced in the settings. But to reach that point where practitioners are really confident, I know you have this and you can run with it out there in your settings, it is based on a coaching model, so that we have Twitch coaches that make a relationship with the setting. This is relational at every level, you know, between the practitioners and the children, practitioners and the families, but really importantly, between the Twitch team and the coaches and the settings. So a coach will do the training within the setting. Some of it's hybrid, if need be, because again, the pressure settings are under, but where we can, there is face-to-face element to it as well. And they come back across the year to see how Twitch is being embedded, to answer any questions, to model things that practitioners may not be sure about. You know, we know the difficulties settings have, and with recruitment and retention and confidence levels, I don't think we've ever been under as much pressure as a sector as we are currently. And what we really want is to improve outcomes for children, and children to love stories and reading down the line. So that is why we support settings across the year, so that this becomes embedded and it becomes part of everyday practice, and we really do, you know, sort of unleash the power of stories and repetition within settings. So story time becomes something really sort of significant and intentional. It's non-negotiable within settings, and it's used with that real purpose of supporting children's language learning, love of reading, with that repetition to really deepen learning and engagement. And we think one of the things that absolutely key to it is that interaction strategy, that we actually have something to hook onto to improve our interactions. So that repeat, check, reason and imagine. And the feedback is that practitioners don't just use that with the stories. Once they're confident with that, they use it to really engage on a deeper level with children in all areas of the curriculum. And you know, if we think about how important it is for children emotionally to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, that is what this approach supports, because you're really doing, you know, some careful listening about what children are saying. Check that you've understood, show that it's important to you, that you do get it right, and to explore with them the reasons, and then to go on those flights of imagination with children about what would have happened if Goldilocks had gone to a different animal's house? What could that have been like? You know, so just thinking about different things that could happen. So really using that dialogic reading, and we hope that through this, Twitch can really support, you know, our future readers. At the moment, Twitch has been evaluated through the Education Endowment Foundation as a pilot. We have run it for the last 4 years, and we're hoping that we might have the opportunity in the near future to roll this out on a wider scale. So keep listening, keep watching, and we will drop into the chat a link to the website that we have here at the university. And that's all from that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, quickly, sorry, one more thing, sorry. So particularly if you're in the areas of the northwest, like Manchester, Liverpool, South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, just to keep an eye out for any announcements of opportunities to take part in the Twitch programme.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sally and Fifi. What a wonderful, inspiring presentation that was. We do have about 5 minutes before we move on to the final part of the webinar, just to answer a couple of questions, and I'll try and sort of collate them and bring them together for our panelists. So Karen, if you wouldn't mind just coming on camera, and then if I'll come to you first, if that's okay. So one of the questions, thank you all for your questions, incredibly helpful. One of the questions is, how can we get involved in the research project on reading?
Okay, so if you email me, and my contact details are at the beginning of the presentation, hopefully the next phase of the research project is starting in March. Alongside practitioners and teachers, I would really like to encourage parents and families to get involved.
Thank you, Karen. Moving on to thinking about, comment about a fantastic set of data indeed. For you, what will success for the year of reading look like for early years, and how will this be measured and evidenced? I can say a little bit more about our ambition at the National Literary Trust, but from your point of view, Karen, it'd be useful to hear.
That's a really tricky question, because I'll kind of counteract the external measures that are put into place for early years settings. So if we do all this wonderful stuff, and the important thing is children enjoy reading, that's a point of it, isn't it? What will also happen is our good level of development will be enhanced at reception, and any other external measurements that are there. It would be great if reading for pleasure data increased. For me, it's if children are just enjoying and having fun, and it's meaningful to them at whatever age and stage.
Thanks, Karen. I think for the National Year of Reading, there is a theory of change and a set of KPIs that we'll be monitoring against, to make sure that the National Year of Reading isn't just a 1 year. There is a legacy there. For me, we'll know it's working when every child has someone who reads with them, not as a task, but that moment of connection and joy. And when practitioners and families talk about stories as something they do together, part of how parents play, relax, and the power of reading aloud and sharing stories is seen as one of those most precious gifts we can give to children in early childhood. Every child should have access to picture books, poems, silly rhymes and songs. And most importantly, the experience of joy that comes from being read to and seeing themselves as storytellers and readers. So we'll know this campaign has been successful when early reading is recognised for what it truly is, that reading in its own right. So I think, there's a real ambition around the National Year of Reading, and the most powerful players here are right on this call. So I'm excited about the year ahead and hopefully what the National Year of Reading can achieve. But moving on to a further question, and then I will come to Sally and Fufi. What's the best resource we can visit to help EAL children and parents of EAL children because parents don't always engage with reading with children, and as early years educators, we try to be as inclusive, of course, as possible, but pronunciation in other languages can be lost. While we have English versions, we're always encouraged to read in home languages. If language is not familiar, how can we ensure early years reading is supported with EAL children? And that's to Karen.
So the National Literacy Trust has a wealth of resources that are very easily accessible. I would also say Birth to 5 Matters, because I'm highly biased, apologies, has a wealth of resources alongside family hubs, your stronger practice hubs. Birth to 5 Matters has a document specifically designed for parents, carers and families, and EAL is a real focus in there. Practical things, record yourselves telling stories, singing rhymes. Let's not presume that parents know what we know. So the way that we tell a story, as Sally and Fifi have talked about, is not something that comes natural to some parents, carers and families. So model it. Use the digital platform that you've got, and don't presume that the rhymes that we sing are the same that are being sang in the home environment. So get to know what's happening with families, but it is tricky. It's not easy to do.
Thanks, Karen. Just to call, so the National Literacy Trust, we do have a range of resources supporting the best start in life. These have been translated into 19 languages and they are available digitally. They also have voiceovers in the same languages, so you can follow along with the resource and have it spoken out loud. So I think we put the link to that in the chat. What I will say about resources, in the chat already, there's some wonderful resources being highlighted. As part of the National Year of Reading, on our website, we will be collating resources. So you'll be able to look at what other resources are available through our partners. So making sure we have access to all of the resources that are on offer throughout the year. I'm going to quickly come to Sally and Fifi now before handing over to Gavin. Could we use Twitch in reception, and would this approach benefit Year 1, Key Stage 1? I'll ask that question first.
The answer is yes. The process is just as appropriate with the older children, and you may the thing with traditional stories, there are versions with few words. There's versions with sort of more language within them, and you can choose the ones that are most appropriate for the age range that you're working with. Not that you have to read every word on the page at any age, I'll just say that. But again, that's that having the confidence to adapt the approach, and knowing your children and knowing the communities that you're working in. And I was just going to say, before Brisbane Fufian is back on we're supporting children who have English as additional language. Repetition is really also helpful there. So the Twitch, with some of the feedback we've had, because the story doesn't move, they can see on the page what the words are referring to, it's read every day. And those are some of the children that you can focus on in the later weeks, in weeks 2 and 3 of Twitch, is really making sure that they're making the connections there with the vocabulary. So yeah, repetition is another key one. Fufi, anything?
No.
Thank you. Can I just ask you one final question before I hand over to Gavin, because I'm conscious of time. So I know that you mentioned translated resources. I presume the guidelines, as we have plenty of stories and rhymes in our own language. That's one of the questions around how do translated resources link to Twitch, and how do we use Twitch for SEND children who may struggle with some of the concepts and stories, and how would you adapt this approach to be inclusive of them too? There's also a similar follow-on question around how this approach could be applied to children who are neurodivergent or non-verbal. I'm conscious it might be a quick answer given we want to.
Yes, so I don't know which. There's too many questions. I don't know which one to go for. I think we know we've had a setting who've used Twitch in there for children with additional needs, specifically with older children. and they found it in upper year 1, Key Stage 1, and they found it quite helpful to kind of, that slow pace has really been beneficial for the children. In terms of language and translation, something that we've been we're working on in terms of making the books as accessible in as many different languages as possible. That the challenge is that the handbook is quite a hefty handbook that's written for 9 books, so it's very hard to kind of change things, because that will change what the practitioners are doing. But I'm interested. I didn't know about the National Literacy Trust's digital resources on translated tasks, so I think maybe that will be something we will incorporate in our future provision in the handbook. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions. Thank you for those questions, everyone, because they're really, really helpful. I'm going to hand over now to say thank you so much to our panelists and speakers. You've been wonderful. I'm going to hand over to Gavin Salmon, who is a project lead for the National Year of Reading at the National Literacy Trust, for the last 10 minutes of our webinar. So thank you. Thanks, Gavin.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And thank you to everyone from the panelists as well. It's been really illuminating. So as we begin to wrap up our time together, has been an absolutely illuminating webinar. I've been given the opportunity to tell you how you can stay involved with the Go All In campaign. I've been reading the chat, people have been asking about the LMS and saying they've not been able to sign up. And just to reiterate what Ellie had said in the chat, that will be going live this week. So please stay focused on your emails, and it will be landing with you in the next couple of days. So your next steps, you have 2 options. You can either dip in and out, checking out the website goallin.org.uk to check out the webinars and the resources that Tracy mentioned at the beginning of the session. Equally, and we would love you to do this, if you'd like to be part of the Go All In journey, you can sign up to the LMS, or the Learning Management System. The schools and settings which have already signed up to Go All In, you will shortly receive that information for this platform. And if you haven't already registered, you can choose a pathway or follow the QR code on the next slide. So when you land on this site, you'll see your dashboard, which shows you the pathways that you've been asked to sign up. So it could be early years, it could be primary, could even be secondary. And if you have, there'll be 1 pathway per term, and per phase, following those themes that Tracy again mentioned this morning, in the room, in the setting, and in the community, with phase-specific resources for every step of the way. So your dashboard will show you your school's progress through the pathway, and with up and coming reminders for any events or resources that will be dropped so that you can access. So in the pathway, you'll find a navigation bar on the left so that you can navigate straight to the things that you need, as well as a little pop-out drawer on the right with calendars and links. Here you'll sign up for forms for every event, all resources, and importantly, reflection activities to complete throughout the year. Because we know that building, and we've been talking about this today in the webinar, a reading for pleasure culture is more than just a tick box exercise, or coming just to a webinar or reading a resource. It's those reflective activities that are the basis of completing the course and unlocking the certificate for each term. So on this slide, you'll see that you'll get some digital badges for completing case studies, going to resources, coming to webinars, and this marks your progress as you progress on your journey. And at the end of each term, you'll receive a certificate and assets into your email signatures and more. And these certificates will be for schools, will be for childminders, and will be for settings. So they'll be absolutely dedicated to your setting. So if this one we've had, it says schools at the moment, but it will be absolutely put to all the other settings as well. We've also got some really special prizes for participating schools and a reading culture certificate, which will recognise those schools and settings which have gone above and beyond this year and at other times. We've been asked in the chat whether this webinar will be recorded, and just to reassure everyone, as long as you've signed up to the webinars, you'll receive a link with the videos in the email, and equally we're going to house this video on the National Literacy Trust's YouTube channel too. And one of the last things that I would want to highlight is an event that's happening really soon, and it is our in-person Early Words Matter conference in 2026, title being Science to Story, How Research Transforms Every Word into Long Life Reading. It's on the 27th of March, being hosted at KPMG in London. And as you can see, we have got some absolutely fantastic speakers. If you'd like some more information to sign up, please go to the QR code or with the link that's just been put in the chat. And I'd like to pass you back over to Tracy to do our final thank yous.
Sorry, Gavin. Thank you. Wonderful. We have a couple of minutes. That's great. Thank you so much. Hopefully, you are all signed up anyway. You will be receiving your link to LMS over the next week. Thank you so much for your interaction, for attending this webinar. Keep an eye open for the resources and for our National Storytelling Week, our World Book Day, and all of the information and the wonderful resources that you already started to share. We'll be starting to collate those and having those on the National Year of Reading website. Thank you for all the work you do. Keep being brilliant. Keep building those foundations for early literacy. And thank you once again for our wonderful speakers. Have a wonderful rest of the week and look forward to seeing you again soon.